I will say welcome to you all, and I'm going to pass on the word and start with you, Katerina. Please reflect.
Sure. Oops, sorry, one moment. So good morning, good afternoon, wherever the world you're watching us from. I'm Katerina Salta from the International Olympic Truce Center and STFC. STFC is our first, is the first refugee and migrant women football team in Greece, a program of the International Olympic Truce Center. And as Majken already explained, we have discussed these things, and we at the International Olympic Truce Center can't help but make comparisons these days between the living conditions of all of us worldwide and the living conditions of our beneficiaries, our players, the refugee women. So in this really crucial, difficult period, we can't help than compare and think that last year, as Majken said, our players, we were struggling because they couldn't travel. There was the lack of the necessary travel documents, but now all of us, the free movement is an unknown, let's say, word for all of us. At the same time, we watch again globally boats, cruise, or in general boats full of people that no country accepts. And I suppose many of us, we feel weak because there is no really access to health services, or at least it's not the same as before. And maybe, just maybe, we fight all against an invisible enemy. And I'm sure that many of us at the same time have the feeling that our institutions are proven unable to correspond in such a crisis. So for all these reasons, we believe that focusing on the United Nations Sustainable Development Goal 16, which is peace, justice, strong institutions, is more necessary than ever. Peace, as I mentioned, we're fighting against an invisible enemy. Justice, how many things feel unfair for all of us right now, and there are strong institutions that are more necessary than ever. So since this time, it's really difficult, but at the same time, it's a great opportunity for us to reconsider about the future. We believe in self-improvement, and of course we believe in community and society improvement. And we believe that this period is the right one to plan, to exchange experiences, and to develop actions for the future in order for us to not face the same situation again, or to be able to correspond in a better way. So this day, on the International Day of Sport for Development, we invite you all to create a global network to exchange ideas and experiences and know-how, and to seize this opportunity and promote the Olympic ideals and the Olympic truce. And I will give pass football talking, as always, to our Lucy.
I'm going to pass, we're passing to you, Lucy.
Thanks, Katerina. Thank you, Majken, for hosting this event on behalf of the Global Girls Network and indeed partner organizations around the world. And I think it's really important to continue to celebrate the potential and the successes of sport for development and peace to date. So, you know, despite the fact that almost all of our programs around the world have stopped, I think it's still important to come together. So yeah, I'm Lucy Mills and I work at Barça Foundation. I'm here in Spain. We're entering into our 4th week of confinement. And I'm also involved on a voluntary basis in a number of initiatives that promote girls' rights through sports. So I just thought that to kick off the conversation around women's sport, in particular in relation to the coronavirus, to think a bit about the broader context of how women and girls are being affected by coronavirus. So not wanting to dwell on the problems right now, because we know that corona is hitting everybody on multiple different levels, but I think it's becoming widely acknowledged that coronavirus is having a disproportionate negative impact on women and girls. So when we translate that to the sports arena, we're seeing that on a whole range of levels. So from, you know, on the professional level, we're seeing athletes and clubs facing economic uncertainties with their contracts and with their leagues being suspended and postponed. Mega events, of course, being pushed back, being cancelled. Mega events provide exposure for female athletes, and oftentimes they're where sort of role models are born. In terms of the football, which is the sport, the majority sport of the Global Goals World Cup, I think that there's a potential to lack the momentum now that was created off the back of the Women's World Cup in 2019. So, and then when we look at sport as an entertainment, I think we're now seeing whether women's sport is still socially and culturally as important as men's sport in terms of considerations, and you know, and women's sport dropping off the radar. And then at the grassroots level in sport for development, which Barça Foundation, my programs are located within. In my particular case, 100% of my sport for development programs have stopped in numerous countries around the world. In my particular case, my programs are in Europe and the Middle East. And then within the network of NGOs, that the sport for development NGOs that we are working with, and that I've been in contact with, there are a number of risks that women and girls in these organizations, both in leadership roles, in employment roles, in voluntary roles, in participation roles, are facing. So, you know, loss of work, lacking access to food, access to sport and physical activity, and health and education. As Majken said, instances of increasing domestic violence, and women feeling less empowered because they're not accessing those spaces that sport for development can provide. So I think that, you know, across the board, we're seeing a wide range of examples where women and girls are disproportionately negatively affected. So I think what we're also seeing, I actually read an article by Women Win today, and they talked about the lack of a gender lens in the humanitarian response to COVID-19, which I thought was also interesting and relevant for today. So that's just to contextualize the problems. We know the inequalities exist. We know that there are stark inequalities within sports, and I certainly feel like coronavirus is exacerbating those inequalities. So I think today we're all about solutions and how to contain momentum and women's sport activism throughout this period. So we've been thinking, the panelists and I, we've been thinking about presenting solutions according to three main levels. So, and I think throughout all of these solutions, what is becoming clearer to me is that activism and advocacy have to play a much higher and you know, much more important role in everything that we do going forward. And I think that will become clear as we get to talking about the solutions. So the three levels of solutions as we position them today are the emergency response. So what are players, activists, NGOs, teams, decision makers, what kinds of things are they doing to you know, offer a lifeline to women and girls in sport during this particular period? The second level, capacity building. So as we know, we're all at home now. Many of us are confined. We have a bit more time on our hands. Some of us, we've seen you know, increased instances of webinars and resources going online. The Clubhouse is a great example of bringing knowledge and information to wider audiences. So thinking about capacity building and making sure that girls and women are equipped with knowledge and skills and information that maybe otherwise hadn't had access to, or you know, are using this period to try to equip themselves for when things get started up again. And then the third level is the vision for the future. So what are we going to commit to that when things do start up again, that we can have better equality baked into program designs, are seeing a future where that as Katerina said, we're not just going back to business as usual, because actually that's not what we want.
Thank you so much, Lucy. I think that's something for us to actually think about for a second also when we're here together. It's just that, what is the vision of the future? So what are some of the first kind of instant reactions that comes to us when we think that? And then let's for sure dive really, really deep into that one, I think, in our ongoing and future conversations. So Iris, will you please take it on from here? Please introduce yourself.
Yes. Okay, so I'm Iris. I don't mention my Greek last name. So I am International Relations and Sport Diplomacy Director in Peace and Sport. I work in Peace and Sport the last 4 years. I'm mainly a sport manager all my life, organizing big competitions and small competitions, and working in international federations in the IOC. So I am from the sports world, basically, but I entered also to the peace world by working in peace and sport. So I just want to say to everyone, maybe you don't know a little bit what is exactly AP6. What are we doing on AP6? Why AP6? So AP6 was declared in 2013 together, but by the United Nations and the IOC together with peace and sport support. And also Novak Djokovic as a champion for peace was together at this day. So this day, it is the International Day of Sport for Development and Peace. So at that day, we don't celebrate the Olympic values and all these values which are around sport. We are celebrating sport itself. So the values that really sport is teaching you in your life itself. How sport can make you happy, and the role that the sport plays in the society, and the power it has to create a dialogue, understanding, social inclusion, and affect social inclusion, and so on. So it is a celebration which is bridging the two worlds together, the sports world and the peace world. There is no other day that this is bringing these two days together. And we don't celebrate winning and trophies and everything. We are celebrating the power of sport on the impact of the happiness of each person. So Peace and Sport is an organization that is global. We don't do only field work. We are not only doing a certain influence into organizations. We do everything. We have field work. We have a big forum every the end of the year. So we bring the two worlds together, and then we also have we play a big role in AP6 and the awareness and everything. So this is about AP6. So I hope now you understand a little bit more, and therefore we have this fantastic panel today, and we discussed about girls and women, because this is it. We talk about all these issues that need to be addressed more, and then we have the white card. We were thinking, what symbolic action can we make about them doing something for this celebration? So the white card comes from the cards that sport rules and have itself. So in football, you have the yellow card and the red card. So we show and we raise our white card. So this way, people can connect into the real value on the values of sport for the social good, rather than winning, participating, or anything. So with this simple symbolic, very easy symbolic action, we want to make people more involved, and we are doing this the last years, and it has a lot of it's growing much more, and at least for one day, for a little bit, you will catch the attention of the people, of the athletes, of the coaches, of the humanitarian people, of the people who work in UNHCR, UN. What is this? Okay, International Day of Sport for Development and Peace. So it makes easier people to really celebrate and participate. This year we couldn't do any events because this year is usually celebrated with events, people, athletes, people coming together, kids, and making having fun through sport, so they can celebrate it. So Peace and Sport did a digital campaign, and mainly based on the white cards. And we saw, especially the day that the Olympics were postponed for next year, immediately it was a relaxation towards the sports world. So we saw immediately the interest of international federation, national Olympic committees, and sport organizations to really come and celebrate this day digitally, at least. And many people are at home; they don't know what to do. Let's do a white card today, So this is what I wanted to say, and also I want to say that Peace and Sport, through the programs that we do and through all the awareness that we give, gender equity is in our first priorities to work this. And especially we have a program in Jordan with refugees, and gender equity within in this area. It's very difficult to put it in. So I don't want to talk much because I lose your attention. So I give the relay to the next one, and then we talk again.
Great. So just want to tell you that we were supposed to play a Global Goals World Cup in Amman in Jordan like this last Friday, but of course it is also postponed, and we'll, whenever time we'll see when we get to play there. But 32 teams were all ready to play last Friday. So unfortunately. But anyway, so
well, maybe it's fortunately for us, because maybe we can have also a team.
Of course.
And now we can send a team from the refugee camp, from Zaatari refugee camp, which is nice.
Yeah, it's good. We have a team from Zaatari. We also have a team from the Gaza camp as well. So that would be amazing. Let's definitely connect on that one. That's of course also for anyone here that. All our tournaments, we were supposed to play 9 this year, and the Global Goals World Cups, and they are of course now being postponed into both later in the year and in 2021. And that's also why we have built this clubhouse to kind of find ways where we can stay connected with the teams and people interested in women's football and the global goals. I think there's so many of there's the ones to be, as you are addressing, Lucy, where you're saying this is the time maybe more than ever to be advocating and being an activist in the world of sports. So how do we get a chance to do this while we are sitting here, in our homes? But Lucy, so will you just try to then take us through your first thoughts about emergency response?
So my perspective, so from a Barça Foundation perspective, as I said, our programs are all on hold, and our programs are, as Iris was explaining, they're using sport to promote education, social inclusion, and prevention of violence among children and youth, and this includes, of course, both boys and girls. And so I think, and we partner with and we fund organizations that are frontline, so frontline working with refugees, frontline working with marginalized groups, frontline working with children with disabilities. So the fact that they have stopped right now is of course very alarming. But one of the strong messages that we've been saying to the organizations we work with is that we will weather this storm with them, and we do not want them to be scared that their funding will go away, that we won't be with them when we come out of this. So I think providing some kind of assurance, and so I think this can be applicable for all of us, is that knowing that there's trust-based relationships between and among us, that we're all weathering this difficult period together. So that was one of the first things that Barça Foundation came out and said with the organizations we work with. And then there's for the implementation organizations themselves, there's a whole range of emergency response activities happening, from moving information and education resources online, continuing engagement through sort of communities of practice between coaches and educators. Majority of people are on their phones, are on Facebook and WhatsApp and so on. So really getting more effective at going digital, which I think would be a good practice for us in the long run. Not always feeling like we have to have meetings in person, and you know, which can be problematic logistically and financially as well. There's instances of organisations that we know that are providing health and you know, different services, food deliveries, and then I know that Street Football World and Common Goal just opened up a COVID emergency response fund. So that's currently circulating within the sport for development, or particularly football for development sector. So I think that there are a range of these emergency responses that organisations have started to get involved in and with. But I think that the key one is the connections that we're continuing to forge and the trust that we're placing in each other during this period.
Thank you for saying. Can I just also just throw out to everybody? I think this is major for the survival of the world of sports, both when we talk sport in development and sport in general, is that we figure out ways how people are gonna survive as organizations in this period of time, because it is, I mean, it will surprise me if sport was suddenly one of the first things that countries are going to open up for. So I think it's going to take a while before we are going to be let out, you know, back out on the fields or back into training rooms and all of this. So please add in, and whenever you have you see good ideas. Now you mentioned 3 things that are happening right now. Share those informations and let them know also to share when they see things, because I think that there's a lot of anxiety right now in how people get through this period of time. And also, do we, you know, there's a little bit of people thinking that sports organizations, they will of course, especially, I mean, sport for development, they just happen automatically in a sense, right? And we don't really just happen automatically. We spend endless hours of organizing and coaching coaches and setting up systems and communicating with parents and stuff like that. So it's not just accidentally that we exist. So on the other side of this, if people don't have the energy to go back out and do this work, we won't exist. Computer easier to use. So anyway, this list automatically. Press space bar to select the. I hear some noises around about it.
Majken, just to add to that, one of the things that we're seeing and we're having a conversation with is, you know, in one program that I manage, we have 200 coaches. 50% of those coaches are women. Many of those coaches are they're contracted by hourly sessions, and they have informal contracts. They're refugees, and they otherwise wouldn't be able to work. So I think, you know, I think everybody, we all need to pay special attention to the people who are delivering these sports sessions on behalf of our organizations, and you know, the coaches who, I mean, Majken, you have a whole load of coaches in the movement, and so I think initiatives like this, that coaches know that they are being supported and there are other coaches that they can communicate with, is really important. We have a lot of really worried coaches right now in here in Catalonia, in Italy, in Greece, in Lebanon, and in the countries where we otherwise would be running football-based sessions.
Exactly. So, I mean, I'll just ask Katerina, if you have, in this whole thing of being in this first phase of emergency reactions, what are some of your thoughts on this?
In our case, I mean, in whichever kind of crisis, one of the most important things is the information. And one of the the biggest problem is the lack of proper information. So from day one, as soon as we had to stop our activities with the team, our main concern was to stay connected, to find ways to stay connected with our players who are women, traveling, most of them alone in Europe. And they live in different kind of accommodation schemes. So some of them live in refugee camps where internet is not provided. Others live in apartments and so on. So our main concern was from day one was to stay connected with them and to provide them the necessary information. For example, 2 weeks ago, our government, the Greek government, decided that in order for us to move, we have to send an SMS for specific reasons to visit the supermarket or the pharmacy and so on. So we had to send we have to still to send an SMS in order to get out. All this information was only provided in Greek. Even English speakers could understand what was going on and what will happen to them the next day. And of course, there are fines that you have to pay, penalties if they catch you. So this is just a small example from day one. Our main concern is for them to get informed correctly. Because the main goal of our program is, of course, the social inclusion, but also their protection and their psychological well-being. So we stay connected with them in daily basis. We provide them the necessary information, and of course, we answer continuously to any questions that they might have, or we try to find solutions in their personal problems. Personally, I have spoken also with the house owner of our assistant football coach, who is a refugee himself, for him to understand what would happen with how he would pay the rent from now on, for example, if his salary stops. Or I mean, there are small or bigger personal problems that they need our assistance, and we're always next to them. Talking about the emergency, this is our main concern, for them to feel always connect with the team, to, as we have expressed from day one last year, that we are more than a team, we are a family. So for them to know that they are not alone, and that we will continue to support them no matter what.
So I think, sorry, that is a beautiful reflection for all of us to really think that way. I mean, I think I would always say that any person in the world deserves to have a great team, and anyone also deserves to have a great coach, great guide in their life. In that way, that there's so many things that we can figure out together. If we have a great team, that we could do it with great family, great connections with someone else. So Iris, on you.
Yes, I wanted to add to this that before we reach even to do some sports, education is the first thing. Everyone needs to be educated about sport. The coaches need to be educated, and all this is a difficult logistics procedure that needs to be made sometimes, because you need experts to do that. And here I want to mention that Peace and Sport has created the methodology, the Peace and Sport methodology, which is Barça also has this methodology, very close methodology, which is an application you put on your phone, and then you can do exercises to the children based on values. And you can do this anywhere. You don't need a football pitch. You don't need the very sophisticated places. So with this application, you don't need to be very close to the coach who is doing it. However, you can teach him or her to do this. And also there is a specific way that you can monitor and evaluate all the data, because the coach needs to put in all the data. So just to explain to you, you don't do football to play football and win, but you are a coach and you say, I am in this concept, in this environment, I need to work on self-confidence with my pupils. So, okay, I push the click of self-confidence, and then exercises come out with the sports that will help you to enhance the self-confidence of your children. So this is basically how sport is used for the social good. So, but I want to stress that with the coaches, for us, for now, we are in contact with Zaatari refugee camp. The good thing is that they have internet, they have 4G, so we can cooperate with them. We have driven this attention to the federations. The federations will send more material that they can read, and they can become referees, maybe, like more material to read. And we will organize some Skype sessions with them in order to stay encouraged and stay in there. And also these hours, these days, these last 3 days, we have a huge mobilization. Zaatari camp is all doing white cards. Every caravan inside is doing white cards. So this was a project for the coaches to get in contact with the other refugees, but not by going to every caravan, but through telephone and through the internet. So I just wanted to mention this, that education is before all. So everyone understands what sport is and what sport can do.
If I may add something, Majken, because I referred the lack of internet, and also Iris reminded me. At the same time, we asked our players, so in the case that someone has the lack of internet, we will find a solution about that. We will provide them with the necessary internet connection. And as far as concerns education that Iris mentioned, I didn't know where to mention that in the time of the emergency or the capacity building. Of course, education is number one, and it also helps us to stay empowered, and helps our psychological well-being. So we continue in a way to our football trainings. I connected to this connected capacity building because, for example, our players had no idea, even many of us, of course, we had no idea about the Zoom application until now. But now we use Zoom for so many things. So our coach has started last week some simple football trainings, some physical trainings, and we will soon also restart our workshops again through the support, of course, of the technology.
Perfect. Thank you for sharing this. And that, I mean, in a sense, Lucy, that just brings me to the second theme that we're going to discuss today.
Yes. So in terms of the capacity building, education networking, right, Majken?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So it's been, I mean, it's been really enlightening, actually. I think seeing how many organizations and events are committed to putting their content openly, freely online. And I think when you look at conferences previously, conferences are actually very elitist. Only a small number of people can attend usually. There's an entry barrier to loads of people, whether it's financial or status or geography or title. So I think the learnings that come out of conferences can be quite, the trickle on when a conference is finished, it can be quite limited. And I'll be the first one to put my hand up and say that I've been to conferences and I haven't transmitted the information back to my team, for example. So I think what's very exciting about what's happening now is a couple of days ago, I was on listening to a webinar of panelists of experts, of athletes and former athletes, and women involved in women's football. This morning, I was involved in a summit on sport for development and peace. Today, I've been invited to join Global Goals, Clubhouse, and there are just so many of these exciting initiatives happening. So I think that has opened up a level of access, which is great, but I think then there's another level of access, which, as Katerina talked about, is actually taking that further and taking that to your players, to your coaches, and trying to overcome internet and connection and handset issues to make this content and these learnings even more accessible.
Yeah, for me, my concern is, I'm alone at home. There's nobody here. So many days of isolation. Guys, I don't like this. I don't like this, and in sports, one thing that in sports you cannot teach is if you don't really show to the child. So I can understand that we can have access to all this, material and forums and discussions that are around. But if you go down to how do I do sports and the values, how they are transmitted, you cannot transmit this through, you need this physical connection that is so important, for sport and for each human being anyway.
Yeah, I think that's a huge dilemma. Jackie, can I actually unmute you and ask you a question if you have a second? I would actually love to talk to you and see if I can get her on. Jackie is a coach, and she went through together with Katerina also, and with Becca. We did a coach program last year, and we got everybody of all of us together, right? We met for several days, and we brought the teams in, and we had, so that whole thing about both going out coaching and but also the coaches connecting. And then of course in these times, and also talking to you, Lucy, talking about, okay, can we actually do a coaching program in Spain, and can we actually, is there elements of this that could be done online? And my whole mind is like, there's nothing more I love more than seeing people going on a pitch or being together with other people. So I mean, for all of us reflecting, can we really create this connection that we know from being physically together, not being physically together? So Jackie, if you are there and are listening in, please join in on this. Or if there's one of the other coaches that are, Mary, I can see you, and Becca, somebody that wants to reflect on this one, please join in.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can.
Yep. Okay. No, I mean, I think, like you said, when we're together and we had the coaching program in Copenhagen, it was a development course, okay, let's say for 12 coaches, but then we go out and inspire how many players. So then in turn, you're not only inspiring 12 coaches here, maybe each coach maybe has 20 or more players. So then 12 times 20 is how many people you've now affected. So in a way now we're stuck in quarantine and we're talking, how can we reach out to coaches, players in this time? So I think we can use this tool like what you're already doing with the Clubhouse to hopefully give coaches and players different ideas to continue in developing and continue in this fight for women's football, to be seen as a respected profession.
I mean, Lucy, I'll throw that one at you and just say, I mean, your thoughts, because maybe as Jackie is saying, is what we do right now, also saying that we will build our, group or team and try to stay, it can be we can create a new team, across sectors and across things, but do we create a team that is, in a sense, trained twice a week, if it's in conversation or training on how we do it? So
yeah, and so I remember Majken so we've been in a forum, on-side forum that brought together women from different sectors. I play in a football team, which is a very politically active football team. Here in Barcelona, there are very strong community organizing, community mobilizing, and groups of activists who I think if you add that layer and level of sport could be really powerful. Because I think, Majken, the whole ethos underpinning global goals is about women coming together through sport, yes, and joining in a team, yes, but it's also that sense of purpose that is on top of that. So I think the strength in bringing groups of women together is, whether it has to be rigid in-person training twice a week or not. And I think that this whole situation now is throwing up, is putting that on its head, and it's actually forcing us to think about how we mobilize differently. And so we've had conversations about, you know, one of the things that coronavirus, this whole situation, has made me realize is that there is a lot of activism that can be that we can all individually, respectively, do on a local level around us, and so organizing and mobilizing women through the lens of sport and the values of sport, and under the umbrella of sustainable development goals, and contributing actions towards the goals, very much echoing the work of the Global Goals World Cup, and challenging that sense that a team has to be training twice a week with matches on a weekend, because we all know that it's much more than that anyway. So the physical manifestation of the trainings, if it's a virtual game, that, or actually my team, we've been doing daily challenges every day. So kicking tea bags into mugs and putting 10 books on our heads and silly things like that. So I think it's just, we're not going to be in confinement forever, let's hope. But I think when we come out of it, we will maybe think more creatively and locally, and overcoming funding barriers, movement restriction barriers, and start to think about organizing groups of women through sport in a more creative and different ways.
Regarding local activism, one of the really clever ideas of the Global Goals World Cup is that you have to choose a specific SDG, a specific sustainable development goal, and play for it. So actually not only play for it, but actually develop actions for it, promote it. And this is my goal, our goal, number 16, peace, justice, and strong institutions has been our SDG from the very beginning. So as International Olympic Truce Center and the CFC in local level, we teach to our women not only football, but also the SDGs, and we focus on the SDG 16. And because in our case, decision making is, they're always involved in the decision making with their ideas. We develop actions and we promote the SDG 16 to the local community, and we actually develop actions with the local community, and this way we develop a local network of activists, which I think is really, really important. And this can be wider, can be bigger, I hope and I believe, after this crucial period. There are many initiatives which have been born during these weeks in Greece, especially in Athens. So as we all know, sport is a really important and powerful tool to promote ideals. And that's what I think we will do after this quarantine finishes.
Here I want to...
So in the last one that Lucy have challenged us to talk about today, that is vision for the future. So while sports world is collapsing, it is an opportunity to rebuild with equality and no going back to business as usual, that you were writing. So I think reflect a little bit on this. I mean, both no going back, what does that, how do we take the best of what we have, but also how do we give ourselves room enough to really think about what are some of the new ways that we could potentially take the world of sports, not only for girls and women, but for all of us.
I'll kick off. So in sport for development and in my work with Barça Foundation, I think that if I think about the vision for the future and in a way that doesn't just go back to business as usual, and acknowledging the fact that coronavirus not only shows us these huge inequalities, but it also is exacerbating them. So thinking about the fact that we're going to have to counterbalance and kind of over invest initially to then go back to our usual equality initiatives. And so I think that the two main things that I'm thinking about when I think about the vision for sport for development, I think first of all, activism and advocacy should be a key, essential, included in programs and projects in sports programming for girls, programs that, you know, while they're participating in sport for development and sports programs, they're being encouraged to be brave. Team Brave is, I know, watching, and I love this sentiment. So it's girls questioning the system, questioning the environment, questioning the challenges that they're facing, and questioning why, and getting girls and athletes and coaches and leaders and administrators to be more critical and more questioning, and so I think that I've seen in recent months some really good concrete examples of where activism is embedded with sport delivery or sport for development delivery. So a really nice one recently was by two phenomenal women in Somaliland called Asma Saeed and Savannah Simons. And they are battling tirelessly every day to deliver girls' football sessions to women in enclosed spaces, acknowledging cultural and religious realities and norms. And they are just growing and growing and growing, and they are growing off the radar oftentimes, with zero federation support, with zero government support, and they're just building this incredible energy around girls' participation. And then they took that and they took that energy towards what they're doing in football to the Somaliland Marathon, where it was just assumed that this was a running race for men and boys. And through advocacy and pressure and influence, a couple of months ago, they managed to, I think, half an hour before the race, I mean, their story is incredible, but they managed to register and get 50 women to run the Somaliland Marathon. So these kinds of small actions that challenge and influence, you know, they have set a precedent in Somaliland now for future marathons, for future women running. I use another example in Barça Foundation that's not gender equality specific, but it's where we embed advocacy. So here in Catalonia, we work with, we deliver football and educational programs with unaccompanied refugee minors who are living in shelters. So Iris, we're doing some of these online sessions with the kids who are obviously confined to the shelters and the centres right now, and the accommodation where they live. But as well as delivering programs, we also have a very strong advocacy level, which is targeted at government to try to address and change the rights around, you know, the time it takes to access permits, you know, so kind of rights around working for minors between the ages of 16 and 18, and so trying to lobby on an advocacy level to improve the system for unaccompanied minors, so that when they turn 18, that they can be legal in the country, they can have the right to work. So and there are countless other examples, but I think that for sport for development, now is the time. If we're designing projects, we should design them in a way that recognizes what the root underlying challenges that girls and women are facing, and try to build in advocacy to change them.
So there's a simple but sweet saying really is that if you use activism, you build attitude. And maybe that's a little bit of also what we need in the world, is that in the world of development also to build attitude, to trust and know that we actually have the potential to rethink and engage and implement ideas of where we bring education in probably way earlier than we see it today in the world of sports. So we don't have so many minutes left. So I will just for all of you.
Two small things to add to this. I want to say that projects are effective and successful if you gain the trust of the people that you are and the environment. If they trust, if you come there showing that you have a system and you have a structured program and this is working, I don't think that this is you will have a lot of success. So if you trust the people that you are there and you go there and you are open-minded and you are very flexible according to adjust your program to each environment, in each, like before said, the cultural barriers and the religion barriers and everything. So many things that are right for you in your culture are not right for the others, so you cannot as an organization go and just implement what you have in mind. You need to be flexible and open-minded. And I want very quickly to say that now for me, humanitarian projects using sport as a tool is best organizations to come together. We have partnerships. We see that in Zatari we are 7 partners. Everyone plays their own role. And to involve more organization into your program with specific expertise, each organization, and a little bit of budget, because if every organization puts a little bit of budget, the budget becomes bigger. So it is not that organization, this competition. I feel this competition organizations who will do more, or who will shine more, or who will have the biggest visibility. It would be better, if you really to come together and find the balance. And I think this is very, very. I see this with our program in Zata. It's very effective and very good. And organizations need to cooperate, which is great. And then specific for girls, I wanted to just that you need to consider, first of all, as I said before, the environment and the girls, and what are the cultural barriers and the religion. So we have different difficulties in the Middle East. For girls, we have different difficulties. Similar in Africa, it's difficult in South America, or it's even in our society. We are doing humanitarian work. It's also different. So you take the position of the woman at each society. It exists. You see what you need, and you bring the good people together, and always try to educate women to teach the girls. You are doing a fantastic work, all of you. So this is also very, very important. And you don't need to be to have a lot of education before on sport in order. If you have the power, the willing to do sports, and you always love to do sports, or maybe you recognize it now, we can do a lot right now. So I think that girls need a specific environment to exist in sports, and we should always consider that and try to make the best for them. And laws and everything, of course, we have to do that, but try to adjust to the situation you are. So that's from me. Thank you.
I'm gonna give you the word back in a second. So I just want to tell everyone, I think that
everybody prepare your whitepads and open your video, please.
There is a super, super important thing to say, that it is important to trust each other, but it's also important to trust and find that inner trust of you, that you trust that you believe in and you belong in the world of sports. Sport is ours to own and ours to play with throughout our lives. So now, Iris, I will say thank you for Katerina and for Lucy for bringing some very, very thoughtful conversations. And thank you everyone for being here. And I would also really invite you all, if you have ideas for conversations, if you would like to co-host a conversation with us, just then write us. We would love to hear from you. And then now we're putting on pictures, but a shout out to the woman, I can see your face, but now I can't see your name, that was doing the project that Lucy was talking about.
Exactly.
Lucy, what was her name?
Both of them are watching, Lucy.
Savannah, I can see your name.
Savannah, yeah. I don't know if she's going to open her video or not, but I don't want to shame her, so she's there. So
yeah.
Guys.
Hi.
You have an open invitation to come in and join a conversation with us whenever we can find the time and it works for you to talk about the projects that you're doing. That's really
Thank you.
to hear. So now that means that all of us, and now Iris, is you to wrap this baby up. Thank you.
Yeah, let's. I see some cameras closed. So Jackie, Marie, Hesa, Judith, Anfisa.
If you don't have a piece of paper, go like this. If you don't have a piece of paper, just do a victory for peace. Is it that way or this way?
No, it is the wide way, and it's not only for peace. It's like for development and peace, only through sport. So, who is doing the screenshot?
I am. You know I am.
So great, Anfisa, you're there. Hesa, maybe Judith, Marisa. Let's wait a little bit. Maybe they open also their cameras. And someone called ST.
Either way, all the cameras, all the photos cannot be in the same picture. So I'm rolling around for you to have.
I think they can.
Everyone.
Yeah,
they can.
Marie, can you do that?
I cannot do that. Let me see. Oh, wait.
Or just do it with a phone.
Now I saw all of you. Okay.
Bravo, Katerina.
I did it, sorry.
Now you also need your own white card. That's my
Yeah, I will. I'm just.
Yeah, perfect. At least now we have one taken by the phone.
We're ready.
Perfect.
It is.
Show your white card.
It is your white card I need.
So thank you very much, and I hope that this discussion is a kickoff to meet all together again. We make you think a little bit of how you can also put in your value, because we need all of you and all your knowledge and experience in order to make a better work around the world, in the field and outside the field. Okay?
So thank you all for joining. Thank you all for holding up the white card.
Stay safe.
Stay safe.
Thank you so much.
Stay safe. So the more you stay in, the sooner we can go out to the stadiums, you know.
Stay safe but active.
Take care.
Yes.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Majken.